Now available in paperback and e-readers, Isis, Amari's Revenge. The goddess next door is confronted by a Nubian queen out for revenge at the Metropolitan Museum of Art in this inaugural Isis series adventure. Get your copy of Isis, Amari's Revenge in paperback and e-readers at Amazon.com and online booksellers everywhere. A long time ago, in a ghetto far, far away in the South Bronx, I wanted to be a comic book writer. And that was a dream that I had ever since I was a teenager, because comic books were the medium that I learned how to read, and I wanted to give back to the medium by helping the next generation find out how great these characters are and be able to share their stories with the next generation of readers. That was a dream that I had when I was younger. However, as I've gotten older, I realized that this dream that I had may not be one that's attainable, and it may not be one that's attainable because the sad state of affairs that the comic book industry is in right now, and the state of my mental and physical health. Now, 2 weeks ago, I had an issue as related to my mental health when I saw a prompt from YouTube saying that a comment was removed and they threatened to terminate my channel, and that caused me to have an anxiety attack where I experienced severe chest pain. And after having that episode, I have really started to rethink my whole goals in life, and the goal of becoming a comic book writer is one of those goals that I'm really rethinking, because when I think about the whole toxic state of social media, it's not really a place that I think is good for me anymore. And when I think about one of the most toxic places on social media, which is comic book social media, it's a place that I really don't want to be a part of anymore. Now, for the last couple of years, I have been making videos regarding the comic book industry, and one of the things I do that for is because, one, I have loved comics ever since I was 4 years old, since they were the way I learned how to read, and two, I wanted to go out here and help a lot of the great indie creators who are putting out great comics and share those comics with people so that people can still discover those comics and understand that yes, there are still great comics being published today. But when I look at the case of comic social media, I don't know if I want to continue pursuing making that kind of content, because the whole environment of comic social media has become so extremely toxic. And with it becoming extremely toxic, I don't know if this is an environment I want to be a part of anymore, especially when I think about the way Ed Piskor was treated and the way people in comics social media basically drove that man to suicide instead of getting that man some sort of counseling and guidance so that he could understand how to navigate his career as a writer and an artist. I mean, when I think about the way Ed Piskor was treated, it really hurts my heart as not only a creator, but as a human being, because the way Ed Piskor was treated was piss poor, because this man didn't need to be put through that kind of trauma by people on social media. No, because there was nobody in the industry to go out here and give him the guidance that I would have given him, because as a publisher, I know what Ed Piskor was dealing with as related to interacting at work. I wrote about this in a nonfiction book called Stop Simping in the Workplace, and I wish I could have been able to talk to him, because I would have advised him again on how to navigate a course as related to dealing with the public, and maybe that possibly could have saved his life. But instead of going out and looking to show respect for the dead, what many in this business called comics basically showed disrespect to this man's life, showed disrespect to this man's life in his passing, and even worse, showed no regard for the part that they played in driving this man to suicide. And after having my own mental health issues, I look at the way Ed Piskor was treated, and it's really making me really rethink being a part of the comic book business, a business that, again, I grew up with, that helped me to learn how to read, helped me to get through rough periods where I was being bullied in my adolescence. And again, I wanted to give back to this business, but it doesn't seem like the people who are currently in this business want to give me the time of day, because many of these people knew where I was ever since about 2012 and even before that, because as I was writing my blog, Sean James Black Freelance Writer, many of these people knew who I was, and again, as they were out here promoting their so-called diversity initiatives, never once ever went to contact me regarding writing any of their projects, never once contacted me about writing any of their projects, and knew that I was available, knew that I had a blog that basically had over 2 million hits, had examples of sample scripts written on the blog, had again multiple 5-star reviews on Amazon.com, and was an acclaimed author of fantasy and science fiction. These people knew who I was, but they didn't ever want to contact me as related to their so-called whisper networks that have been on different message boards for years. So I look at this whole situation as related to this whole dream that I have. And again, it's one of those things that I basically am thinking about walking away from because I really have to put my health first. And the whole thing is, with me putting my health first, I cannot really deal with the toxicity of social media and deal with the most toxic environment, which is comic social media. Comic social media is not only a cesspool like modern social media, it basically is a radioactive cesspool, and it's a radioactive cesspool where basically no one is focused on the business of comics, and that's why comic sales have basically dropped 73% in the last year, and it's dropped 73% in the last year, even though you have people talking about making crowdfunded comics. The crowdfunded comics are not really having an impact on the business. No, what's happening here is that because we have this radioactive toxicity on this culture that's been created on comic social media, people basically are staying away from the medium of comics, and they're staying away from the medium of comics as related to companies like Marvel and DC. They're staying away because it's just gotten so toxic that nobody wants to deal with this toxic environment where people are not really being professional at all. No, people are just caught up in their feelings as related to being polarized in a culture war. And as they're caught up in this polarization as related to this culture war, what people are doing is just going back and forth. And as they go back and forth, they write these clickbait articles that get lots of hits, and they make videos that go out here and generate a lot of views and add revenue for people, and get some people to participate in grifts where they can crowdfund their comics. But this really does not help the medium of comics grow. No, as people go out here and go into their back and forths with each other, the comics industry doesn't grow. And this, it would be, again, as I see to myself, basically a waste of time as related to even trying to get into a business where people are not focused on business because they're just so caught up in all of their personal feelings. And as they get caught up in their personal feelings, we watch as this comic book business basically falls further down into an abyss. And as it falls into an abyss, no one really cares about the elements of good storytelling, and that's not a business I would want to be a part of. After building up my own publishing imprint for the last decade or and a half. Now, after building up my own publishing imprint for the last decade and a half, I have been focused on building a brand focused on excellence and quality, focused on storytelling and character development. That's what I want to focus on. And as I focus on storytelling and character development, when I go out and look to market my stories, what I want to do is go out here and make the characters be front and center for any SJS Direct product or any SJS Direct story. And I want people focused on the story as they look to get to know me. And as they get to know me, I want people to see me as a professional. I want them to see me as a professional who is focused on developing the very best stories, and someone who really shows how much he cares by going out here and making sure that details are researched. Like right now, I'm working on the book Spinsterella Goth Girl Summer, and I'm trying to make sure that every detail fits the year 2000 so that when the reader reads the story, they are taken straight to the year 2000. And that's the type of detail I want to focus on as related to any media I create. And when it comes to the social media image, I want to focus on being a professional. I want to focus on being a professional because in the last 30 years I have been learning how to write. This has been a craft that I have learned. And one of the things that really saddens me is that with me not being able to achieve my dream of being a comic book writer, I'm not going to be able to teach craft to people because craft is very important to creating comics. And one of the reasons why we see so many bad comics being produced these days is because companies like Marvel and DC and Image and Dynamite and many others have just let their quality slip because there's no seasoned editorial to sit down and teach craft to a generation of young creators. Because in the 1990s, craft wound up slipping, and it wound up slipping because companies like Marvel and DC decided to basically stop focusing on craft. And at Marvel in the 90s, they didn't focus on craft. That's why we got those awful books in 1995, but it managed to pick up again in 98. But craft fell apart around 2001 for Marvel and 2002 for DC when Joe Quesada took over at Marvel and Dan Didio took over at DC. And instead of there being an environment where people were taught craft, what happened was people learned a lot of bad habits due to inexperienced editorial. And sadly, because people have not learned craft, this is why you get bad comics. And that's not an environment that I would want to be a part of. No, I wouldn't want to be a part of that environment because as a writer, what I want to do is not only write great stories, but I want to pass craft on to the next generation. That's what I try to do in my comic review videos that I did as related to many indie comics, and many indie creators were extremely grateful for that advice. They were grateful because they want to improve in their craft, and that's something that's hard to do in this modern comic book industry. It's very hard to do because as everybody's out here participating in gossip, no one is teaching craft. And that's the thing that really irks me about today's modern comic social media. It's not a place where people are learning to improve in their craft. No, it's become a place filled with gossip where people are talking about a guy's personal life or something going on in his personal life and not talking about his skill set as a creator, not talking about how they can improve in their skill set. That's one of the things that really saddens me about this business, is that no one is really focused on developing their skills to improve, where you're focusing on making sure that your panels basically are displaying the right action, focusing on making sure that the art is very clear in telling your story, making sure that panels transition from panel to panel so that the page basically moves. I mean, I look at a lot of these modern artists and related to these mainstream publishers, and I see sequences that are very stiff. I see sequences that are not very dynamic. I see action that is slow. And editorial just rubber stamps this, and this is what disgusts me. I mean, I spend years learning about this, about the business, learning about the craft of storytelling, and the standard for storytelling in this business basically is at an all-time low. But I'm told that people knew about me as far back as 2012, knew about me, and knew there was someone who could go out here and produce quality work and could go out here and learn and wanted to learn about the business, had a passion for the business, but the industry again blows off people like me. And again, this is one of the things that again just disgusts me about the modern comic book business. Again, that they're not focused on craft as related to their so-called standards of merit, and even many of these guys who are crowdfunding, they're not really talking about merit. Again, I don't really see people focused on, the things as related to quality, and it just really just disturbs me to see that go on. I mean, people are more caught up in gossip and going back and forth with each other. And if you're focused on gossip and back and forth, that's not a business I want to be a part of, because as a publisher, my goal is to continue improving. My goal is to continue sharpening and honing my craft, continue to sharpen and hone my craft to be producing the very best content. That was my goal for working not only in comics, but also as a publisher. I mean, I'm always looking to improve, always striving to do better, but it seems like the comic book industry that I'm seeing today isn't about those standards. And since it's not about those standards, I really am thinking, maybe it's time to just wash my hands of what they call the modern comic book industry, wash my hands of becoming a comic book writer, because according to the social hierarchies of publishing, I mean, when you go out here and you can write novels and nonfiction, you're on a higher level already. And if you're on a higher level already, why would I want to take that step down? A step down into toxicity, a step down into a toxic nuclear environment that basically is radioactive, where instead of focusing on trying to find the best writers and train the best writers, we have a whisper network looking to dig up dirt on people and gossip and whisper about them on social media, instead of looking to contact the best writers and contact them to be able to build your universe and maintain your universe. Because what I see in most modern Marvel comics is, again, an imploded structure as related to that universe, where none of the books really synergize. And the same thing I see over at DC, which is a jumbled mess. I see where there's no real structure to those universes, and none of the books really flowing together like they did in the 1970s and 1980s, where you saw this synergy where you could go from a top tier book like a Batman or a Superman or a Spider-Man or a Hulk, and everything flowed to lower tier books, like many of the lower tier books like a War Machine or a book like The Heckler. All those books basically flowed together, all due to editorial having a focus. But I don't see that focus, and when I look at many modern books, these books are far below my standard as a writer, far below my standard as a publisher, far below my standard as a creator. And why would I want to go into a business that would be a downgrade as related to skill set and try to bring it up? I mean, why would I want to put myself through all that stress? That's the critical question I've been asking myself, especially after dealing with these anxiety issues. I mean, dealing with these anxiety issues, they would only get exacerbated if I were to even continue looking to pursue this dream of being in comics. And with this industry, again, filled with a lot of toxic individuals, I just look at this business and I don't think it's a business I want to be a part of anymore. Now, for years, I wanted to be a part of that business, but when I look at the toxic environment that is out there right now and how it's all filled with a lot of gossip from a lot of females and a lot of simp men who don't have the backbone or the balls to stand up for their own business. Many of these males sit there and complain about that business instead of standing up and checking that business as related to the toxic women and the toxic manginas who go out here and gossip in this business. There's no semblance of leadership in that bit in the comic book business, and with nobody leading, it's a rudderless ship, that's basically about to crash as on the rocks of rock bottom, as related to the publishing world, about to crash to rock bottom because nobody's directing the ship. And that's the sad state of affairs. And again, I sometimes think that it's a blessing that God didn't let me be a part of the modern comic book business, because the modern comic book business is, again, a toxic environment that is basically exacerbated on toxic comic social media. And this toxic business is not about helping creators become better creators or better storytellers. No, it's about keeping everyone at the bottom of a business that basically is dying, keeping everyone at the bottom, whether it be at low pay or at rates that really undercut, again, many talents and prevent them from actualizing their potential, or going out here and having people go out here and not really allow them to be able to create a run of stories that can showcase their skills, because editorial doesn't come up with a marketing plan for any of these books. I mean, I look at the recent NYX, which is a piece of garbage as a comic. I mean, editorial should have never let that comic ever get approved for publication. Clearly, the concept and premise are not there, and the storytelling isn't there. It's just slapped together to, again, try to be a cash grab as related to the X-Men reboot, a cash grab that really isn't grabbing anyone. Same thing over at DC with their all-out event. Basically, we're seeing this comic industry dying, and a long time ago wanted to be a part of this business, but I look at this business as one that, again, there's nothing I can do for it, no way I could help anyone out in that business, because many of the folks in that business, they're so set in their ways that they don't want to change, they don't want to adapt, they don't want to learn, they don't want to grow, and they don't want to foster an environment where people can grow. And when I think about how Ed Piskor was treated, I mean, here was a man who went out here and just had a love and a passion for hip-hop and comics, and just wanted to go out here and make the best comics possible. And what these people did was basically drive that man to take his own life. I mean, the way these people did that was just reprehensible. And then these people get rewarded with more jobs, never once thinking about what they did to this man. And that's what's really, again, disturbs me. And again, after having my own health scare, I just look at this business and I don't think it's a business I want to be a part of anymore. I don't think it's a business I want to deal with, because it's just a toxic business. Now, I will still go out and look to support great indie creators as related to their comics, but as related to trying to work in that business, that's not a business I want to be a part of anymore, and it's not a business I want to deal with, because if this is the people who are a reflection of this business, then I would rather just stay on the trade side of publishing and just stay on that trade side, because that's a side where there's some semblance of sanity. Now, I know that there are some people out there who are book snobs and elitists, and again, I don't really deal with those kind of folks as related to things. I just focus on my business. I mean, when I go on social media, 95% of the time, I'm usually either making videos talking about different subjects as related to the mainstream entertainment industry and teaching people about the business, or I'm teaching about the publishing business. I just try to, again, keep the political subjects to a minimum, to a point, But I usually spend my time promoting, most of the time promoting my work, letting people get to know me, letting people get to know how intelligent I am. That's what I try to show as related to my skills as a writer, that I take, that I'm gonna, if I do a story, I'm gonna take my time to do that research, so that when you immerse yourself in that world, you get an experience as related to that story being compelling. That's what I want to focus on. But that's not what this modern comic book industry wants to focus on. And as I am getting older, I realize that, there's nothing I can do for this business, a business that basically is not really focused on craft, not focused on creativity, not focused on imagination. No, it's just focused on gossip and nonsense. And I don't have time for nonsense. I don't have time for foolishness. And time is too precious for me to waste going back and forth with people on social media regarding politicians like Donald Trump or politicians like Joe Biden. Again, neither side is doing anything for anyone as related to your culture war, and the culture war is turning out to be one that is a Pyrrhic victory for the comic book industry on both sides. A Pyrrhic victory where you're basically, yes, you got guys getting their indie comics crowdfunded, but it's not really helping the industry, and you've got editorial at these companies basically on a downward spiral. So I don't see where anybody's winning. And again, it's a shame, because again, I had a love for comics and a passion for comics, and sadly I won't be able to have an impact on this business. And that's the sad part that I have to accept as related to life. I'm not going to have an impact on comics. I mean, this industry is in a sad state of affairs, but people have their heads up their backsides, and have their heads up their backsides because nobody wants to change. Nobody wants to change, and again, nothing can be done. So when I look at comics, I mean, in the comic social media, I gotta wash my hands of comic social media and wash my hands of comic social media, because there's nothing I can do for those who don't want to help themselves. Because as I learned working at the Strive Job Readiness Workshop, working with ex-offenders, people in recovery from addiction, and people who are homeless, you have to decide when you want to change. You have to decide when you want to pick yourself up. And there's nothing anyone can do for anyone who is stuck in a state of addiction when they are in denial, like many people in the comic book industry are. There's nothing anyone can do. And what's really painful to watch is watching the addict, who you know has great potential, not look to actualize their potential because they refuse to acknowledge their problem. That's the most painful thing for me that I've had to endure as a fan for the last 25 plus years. I mean, what's sad to me is watching as this whole business that was a foundation for a cinematic universe that made billions of dollars for movie studios never actualized its potential, and it's basically dying as comic shops close all across the country. Again, the addict doesn't want to acknowledge the problem, and many people don't want to acknowledge the problem because they want to enable the dysfunction so that they can continue making AdSense dollars, enable the dysfunction so that they can continue to get their so-called savior comics crowdfunded, and nothing changes. Again, many people don't want to deal with the problem, and again, you can't help someone who has a problem, whether it be alcoholism, drug addiction, or being a comic fan. You can't help these individuals unless they want to help themselves. And it's clear to me that when it comes to this whole fandom in the West, nobody wants to help themselves, and the only thing that a person can do in order to preserve their physical and mental health is to wash their hands of the whole business, wash their hands of that business, and walk away from these individuals. Wash your hands and walk away from the individuals, because their toxicity will become your toxicity. And as I see it, after having that health scare, I just have to again wash my hands of the business of comics and my dreams of becoming a comic book writer, because you can't tell a story to someone who doesn't want to hear it. You can't show them how a balanced picture looks when they want to look at a distorted one. You can't open the eyes of the blind, so you have to leave them to their ditch. And as you leave them to your ditch, you have to shake the dust off your feet as a testimony to them, because there's nothing you can do at this point. And it's sad to do, but it's something you have to do to preserve your health. You have to preserve your health because there's nothing I believe anyone can do about comic social media. Comic social media that is not focused on promoting books and getting books in the hands of readers, but it's more focused on gossip and clicks and views. I mean, that's the sad state of affairs of modern comics, and it's a business that, again, I don't want to be a part of, because, again, while a long time ago in a ghetto far, far away, I wanted to be a comic book writer, I don't want to be in a toxic environment where I can't tell stories. I can't tell stories because of gossip or identity politics and having my hands tied. I mean, that's not an environment I want to be in, and I don't want to be in an environment where I can't learn anything about craft because people are so caught up in gossip. I mean, that's not a business I want to be a part of, and it just hurts my heart to do it, but I believe it's just time to wash my hands of comic social media and wash my hands as related to those dreams of becoming a comic book writer. Now, if you want to pick up my 2 comics that I've done, John Haynes at Death's Door and Esteem No Good Deed, you can find both of those books now on Kindle right now on Amazon.com. And if you want a paper copy of those books, you can get a paper copy of John Haynes at Death's Door on Lulu.com by clicking the link in the description box, and you can get a copy of Esteem No Good Deed in the back of the paperback version of Esteem Blast from the Past. And if you want to check out the full SJS Direct Universe books, you can find all those books on Amazon.com in paperback and Kindle format. You can also find those books at other online booksellers like Google Play, Barnes & Noble, and big box retailers like Walmart and Target. And if you want to help me be able to pay for the covers for the next SJS Direct catalog books that are going to be trade publications, and help me to pay for the interiors of books like the light novel I'm planning, Spinsterella Goth Girl Summer, you can drop a donation to the Patreon, the PayPal, or the Cash App by clicking the links in the description box. That's all I have to say for this video. You can comment, rate, and subscribe. Now available in paperback and e-readers, Esteem Horror in the Hamptons. The aspiring angel tries to escape a house of horrors in this action-packed, all-new Esteem series adventure. Get your copy of Esteem Horror in the Hamptons in paperback and e-readers at online booksellers everywhere. Now available in paperback and e-readers, Isis, Dark Incubus. The goddess next door gets enthralled in a romantic entanglement with an evil incubus in this all-new Isis series adventure. Get your copy of Isis, Dark Incubus in paperback and e-readers today. Now available in paperback and e-readers, John Haynes' Illuminati. The man who rules the world takes on the head of the global elite in this all-new action-packed John Haynes series adventure. Get your copy of John Haynes' Illuminati in paperback and e-readers at Amazon.com and online booksellers everywhere. Support Black-owned and Black-operated digital broadcast media. www.niceradionetwork.com. Nice Radio Network, broadcasting 24 hours a day, 7 days a week.